annual leadership lecture that's sponsored by the Department of Applied Communication. Right now, you probably see a black screen and a few little people over here, but at the top of your screen, you can actually toggle between seeing everyone by clicking on the meeting or on something that says Nathan Jeffers screen. So if you want to see everybody before Nathan actually shares his slides tonight, you can toggle between those two, I think. And so, anyway, welcome to this leadership lecture. Our department loves to put these on. This is actually the leadership lectures were initially designed and created by our advisory board, alumni group that said we want to continue learning about the way that communication can be used to make a difference in our applied context of our workplaces as well as in our personal relationships, which is so consistent with the mission of our department to co-create better social worlds through positive communication. I'm April Chatham Carpenter. I'm the department chair of the Department of Applied Communication, and we have a special guest here tonight, Nathan Jeffers. Nathan was one of the award winners from our spring alumni Making a Difference awards that we gave out in the spring. And I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Gerald Driscoll, who's got a better speaking voice than me. At least it's not in the basement in terms of the register, because he doesn't have the cold that I have. So Gerald, introduce our speaker tonight.
And I'm glad to. And it's just good to see you, Nathan. I want to start just with a personal note, since April's already mentioning that our program focuses on personal application and professional, but I'll say something about professional. But just yesterday, Nathan may be aware of this, but my wife runs into your wife, Jessica, of all things. How does this happen? And it made me aware that, we had this meeting. I think the twins, your babies were already around, but we sat down and you wanted parenting advice, but we got parenting advice from you. And I always cherish that because you gave us some clues on how to parent adult children. And now that we have twin granddaughters, our next lunch, we need some more advice, because you have twin baby girls that are almost or pushing toward 4. But your passion to parent well, love well, and then serve well in the community is evident. And as I was reading over some things that you'd actually written when you graduated about 4 or 5 years ago, I started thinking about your art, the art you develop at the hard work of writing, connecting with others, implementing ideas. In fact, when you finished, you may not remember this, your MA project back in 21 that was focused on a pandemic perspective, as you looked at a rural hospital in light of crisis communication, you said this: I continue to learn the discipline of sitting down to write incrementally, and this allows for the interruptions of life. And between sessions, it gives your mind time to process what you're really trying to say to your audience. And I think that is a beautiful way. That statement is a reflection of your ongoing work, the work you're doing now as a director of marketing and public relations at Carti, a role that when we sat down that many years ago, you were just about to apply for and go for it. So I'm proud of the way you, in that role, continue to find meaningful ways to improve communication as you seek to connect the services of Carti with patients, with the community. So I want to leave off with the same quote that's your favorite quote, and then let it go to you. Remember the Nelson Mandela quote: if I can help one person, I will always be happy with that one. So welcome in, Nathan. A round of applause as we get ready to hear what he has to say to us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. April. Thank you, Dr. Driscoll. It's so good to be back. Let me just start there. This is a fond place, even though virtually with everyone. The Department of Applied Communication has been so influential in my life over the last almost 2 decades, from undergrad to the MA program. Learned so much and really still evolving. And I will say, just to speak to that quote, it's never a perfect art, learning to sit down and write incrementally, but it is something that I think, as you problem solve through anything in life, the more that you can take that the elephant eating approach, one bite at a time, the more you can really wrap your hands around what you're trying to say. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. We're just going to jump right into it. But before we begin, I want to go on a quick adventure. It is not a black screen that my computer's not working. I've actually intentionally started with a black slide because I want to have no stimulus for you. I want you to think back to the dawn of civilization. I know that's probably a stretch, especially because we're staring at a computer right now. But I want you to go back on a journey with me into early primitive days. You're in a dark cave because that's where survival is taking you. There's dangerous things outside. You can't really see that well, but you're huddled up with people that you know, that you trust. And there's not much to do. You might, if you're lucky, be in the age of fire. And if that's the case, then you have a small flame flickering. It's really the only light, and just a little bit to be able to let you have those nonverbal cues from those around you. And what do? Well, there's something that a few of our ancestors did, and that's they became artists. And so in the light of these very small flames, we start to see the appearance of art take shape. So thousands of years ago, and this is actually a real place. This is actually the Cave of Hands in Argentina. It's roughly 9,000 years old, is where we start to see people make their mark on the world. There's actually older descriptions of this, but I think this one's so artistic. In some ways, it reminds me, if you've ever been under bleachers and you see someone write like, Greg was here 2003. It's almost the same thing, but in cave art, people were making their mark, and they were trying to wrap their heads around what they were experiencing, as we all do, trying to make sense of the human experience. But they were all trying to say, what does this mean? And they used the ash and the clay and the things to mark out their hands to say, I'm important and I was here, and these are the people that I was with. And so really it was kind of a declaration to the world to say, hey, do you know I'm important? Do you know I exist? Do you know that as a group we did things together? And in a lot of ways we haven't changed all that much. I mean, we're still, if you back out to, we went prehistoric, now we're back in 2025, we're still leaving footprints. We're leaving handprints digitally. We're still making an impact. We're leaving words and messages to other people, text messages, emails. We have way more information than these folks could have ever dreamed of. And it's still the same type of communication. It's just changed quite a bit. So we're going to shift a little bit, and we're going to talk about culture and brand and ethics through the lens of messaging. And again, I'm really grateful just to be here tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nathan Jeffers. Like Dr. Driscoll said, I'm Director of Marketing and Public Relations for Carti. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Carti as we go through this. And so hopefully, if you haven't heard of the organization, you'll kind of get a little bit better understanding as we go. But really, I am thankful to be here tonight because, as I said, the department had such a great impact on my life. And I don't think I can, overstate that because it really was very influential to me. I have a very fortunate position at Carti to be able to craft the message, the brand, and really a lot of what we do and what we say as an organization leads into who we are, because we do try to back that up through our actions. And so we're going to talk about some of that tonight and some of the alignment, but through the lens of the applied communication lens. I do want to say we have, and I think Dr. April already said it, we are fostering the co-creation. I couldn't not put this on here, first of all. We're fostering the co-creation of better social worlds through positive communication. And that is what, even tonight, if you're here, thank you for spending time to hopefully be challenged, to be inspired, to be empowered, just in how that you can go back to your organization, regardless of how big or how small that is, or whatever your role is, to be able to make a change to create a better social world. And so we're going to focus on that co-creation. And what we're going to really dial into tonight is how are we co-creating? And we're going to really touch on that in a few different ways. But before we do, I'm going to go back to kind of our cavemen days. And so the earliest depiction that we have of cave art, just going all the way as far as we can, 20,000 years ago, are really even more beautiful, I think, than the hands. We actually have images of animals. And this is survival to me. This is that earliest communication saying to another, I saw this animal and I think we could take it, right? It is saying that this is something that we could survive off of. And it's really, again, back to that human experience, similar to the hands. And if we can organize, and those early humans were learning to organize and to take shape of weapons, to be able to hunt these things, they left these cultural artifacts behind to be able to say, this is an important thing for us. And, regardless of where you are in religion, they probably thought this is something that, was divine in a lot of ways. And out of those small tribes, really the first organizations were formed. And Dr. Driscoll, I think it's so fitting. I didn't know you were going to actually introduce me tonight, but since we're talking organizational communication, we're constituted of people. The constitutive view of organizations at our base level, at the foundational level, we are people. And I think if you zoom back to the cave in France, even then, they realized that they were greater than the sum of their parts when they worked together. And so that's what we will really try to hone in on tonight. But before the emails and the mission statements that we have today, right, the humans gathered and they told these stories around, and we talked on it, the central thing in the room, and that was actually fire. And fire was a gathering point. It was really the essence of a lot of things. It was a change, a shift once we created fire. Not only did you have warmth, but you had light to be able to make that art on the wall. You had the ability to cook food. You could harden your tools. You could stay up later, right? In a cave, if it gets dark so soon and you can't see your hand in front of your face, you might as well just go to sleep and wait till the sun comes back up. It changed a lot. And then we learned how to master it and move it. And really our civilizations began to emerge from it. But past even that, we really, as I said, with the animals, we had a connection with it, and we thought that there was some divinity behind it. And our organizations really still gather in large part around a fire of some sorts. Even now, most of us are looking at a screen and we're kind of gathering socially, if you will, around something that's glowing. And so we're going to use this. I'm going to lean into this. I love to work from a metaphor. And so as we try to understand how we can align our communication, our ethics, our values, all of these things to create an ethical culture, we're going to look at fire actually as our framework. And so if we imagine the fire framework, it's really the flame as our communication, because that is what we're actually creating, is that communication. And the base of that flame in this metaphor, the fuel for it, are our values, our ethics. And it's not just the set of values, the set of ethics, it's those ethical decisions that the organization makes, the large ones, the small ones, and all of the things that feed into that. And then our communication ideally would be born out of those. What does that communication give off? Well, if we're doing it right, we're giving off warmth. We're giving off a warm, strong culture to those that experience our organization. But again, when the light falters, then the heat does as well. And so when our communication struggles, then you can see where I'm going with this metaphor. The warmth is zapped from the room, right? When we don't have values and ethics, we can't communicate well, and we're not building that strong culture that we all seek. And so that's what we're going to go through tonight. We're going to look a little bit deeper. And here is kind of our central tenet. And that's that an organization builds an ethical culture by aligning values, communications, and actions. And again, if we look just at its simplest level, our values, what we say we stand for. If you have an organization that has an about page, we could probably find the values there, right? Our communication, this is something that every person on this call could probably give us a different understanding. And I think we do in our first level theory classes on communication. What is communication? There are so many different facets in how we express who we are. And then our actions in all of our decisions, all of our experiences with the people internally, externally, all of our stakeholders are how people experience our organization. So tonight we're going to explore a few different things. We're going to look at our brand identity. We'll go into integrating ethics into that identity. We're going to talk about creating unified culture and really keeping watch over our fire. I'll try not to get too metaphorical, but I love a good metaphor. Because I have so much experience here at Carti, and I think really it's a unique healthcare organization, we are going to use Carti as a case study. We're also going to look at Starbucks. Not sure if anybody's had coffee lately. I could probably use some right now. And also Patagonia, really a cool brand. And I think there's a lot to learn from them as well. But as we go through each of these tenets, I do want to have a quick reflection as well. And so just based on what we've talked about, stories and fire, if your organization had a campfire at its center, what stories would people tell around it? What fuels it? And we don't even have to answer on these, but if you will, let's just hold on these, and I'm going to let you ponder for just a second. Like I said, a metaphor is, you can take this a lot further, and we'll work on extending the metaphor a little bit later. But the stories are one of those core tenets that are sense-making mechanisms for our organization. Helps people understand values and ethics, and it's incredibly important to forming. Thank you, Dr. Marable. Stories of student success and transformation. And really, those stories help to inform. It's kind of that cyclical back to who we are as an organization, right? And what is important here. So let's go ahead and move on to our first facet that we're going to explore, and that's defining brand identity through communication. This is probably my favorite one to talk about, and you can imagine why. Work with the brand all the time. And so I'm going to keep coming back here just for a reminder of our framework, and communication being our flame is where we are. Now, how we communicate really defines what others believe about us. And it happens before they click that About Us page, right? Before they come to you. And this is one of my favorite quotes. You've probably all seen it 100 times, but it's so true. And in culture building and branding, we can say as much as we want, this is who we are. But at the end of the day, if people think or they experience or they feel something different about us, then that's not exactly who we are. So, people will forget what you did, but they won't forget how you made them feel. So an experience with an organization, we can create from a marketing perspective in my role, we can create all the brand messages we want. But if someone walks in the doors and that does not align, then we've lost our brand immediately. And that's kind of what we're going to lean on. So we're going to look at all three brands as we move through all of these case studies. And the first one is going to be Carti. So here at Carti, we have a mission statement, and it is written in so many things that we create. And I think it's really just a reinforcement mechanism to remind us all, here is what we're about. We use ethical language and organizational language in most of our internal communications, and we will tie back in, especially to our internal messaging within our team. So here at Carti, we are making trusted cancer care accessible for every patient we serve through compassion, innovation, and purpose. And kind of what that looks like in practice for us, whereas a lot of healthcare companies are trying to drive more care to a central location, we are actually trying to push care closer and create more access to cancer care so that there's less of a barrier to people being able to get their treatments. What does that look like in practice? Well, in 2015, if you've been on 630 or you're from the Little Rock area, you may have seen Carti Cancer Center. Huge building created in 2015. And at the time, it was said that this would be the destination. This is where people are going to go for cancer treatment across the state. But what happened is when that person that lives in, let's say, Mountain Home or in Stuttgart or in Crossit had a diagnosis, they would much rather not drive 2.5 hours every day, because sometimes that's what's needed to be able to get cancer care in Little Rock. So quickly, the model was turned on its head. And in fact, instead of just coming to Little Rock, we said, let's just make this kind of the core location, and we'll go out from here. And so we established other community-based cancer centers that would have care. And so we have Carti Cancer Centers in North Little Rock, in Conway, in Russellville, in Pine Bluff, and El Dorado. And then past that, let's go even closer to them. Let's go a little bit further out so that there's even more access for smaller treatment clinics where people can still access chemotherapy, where they can still access hematology or radiation therapy. And then even further, let's just make even more access through outreach clinics where we can have just maybe a hematologist and oncologist that could clinic there and do consults. So still that might be 10, 30 minutes closer to home for someone in that community. Really trying to meet people where they are. Someone right in the comments took the words right out of my mouth. So that is really our mission at the end of the day. And that in and of itself creates the Carti model. But I want to show you how we message that model to patients. Looking at the oncology space, and one of the things that I wrestled with, having been at Carti for a while, is that cancer care is extremely hard. There are times where we walk with patients through a journey and they ring the bell and we get to see them for the next treatment or the next checkup, and that scan's clean. And we get to say, you know what, you don't have to come back for 2 years. And they come back in 2 years and that scan's clean, and then so on. And they get to go further out and further out and further out from in survivorship. And there's also stories that don't end that way. It's really a very difficult place for providers and patients, because the healthcare providers we have in this space are uniquely equipped to be able to walk with people regardless of what the outcome is going to be. They will be with them. And so as I wrestled with how do we message to our patients, to our stakeholders, that we can't guarantee a cure. We are not in the business of saying, if you come to Carti, we cure your cancer. That's not who we are. And I wish we could have that reality, but that's not the reality of any cancer care organization. And so the message that we landed on and we've moved to over the last year to year and a half is that we can promise that regardless of what this journey looks like, we will be with you. And so that is the simple message: is we're with you. So I don't have all of the different brands that we'll look at tonight, but I can show you the 3 different commercials. They're short, and so I hope you'll bear with me that we're going to look at for Carti. Hopefully this audio comes through. Dr. Driscoll or April, you may have to stop me if it does not.
Each morning, you choose to fight, knowing that while cancer changes you, it does not define you. At Carti, we're redefining how cancer care is delivered. We're in this for the long haul. Carti, we're with you. When you get the diagnosis, you ask yourself, how will I get through this? Who will help me? But you have to keep going. You didn't choose cancer, but when you choose Carti, it's our promise to be there every step of the way. Carti, we're with you.
You're tough, determined to take challenges head on. But when cancer strikes, you'll need more than strength. You'll need the right care. We provide the tools you need to fight and the compassionate care you need to keep going every step of the way. Carti, we're with you.
So just an example of how we're all human, and really, regardless of if you're a doctor or you're a patient, we all wake up and put 2 feet on the floor and do our best for that day. And again, we can't guarantee anything, but we promise we will get up every day and work as hard as we can alongside you to help you in the journey. Okay, so we're going to move to Patagonia, a little less somber there. But Patagonia, really cool brand. And the more I read about it, it makes me want to move to California, to be honest with you. So Patagonia, based in California, is really a sustainable organization. And they are an example of how when your words and actions align, really you can message in a very creative way for sustainability. They have some of the funnest taglines, and if you've seen some of their campaigns, this is just a few. Worn wear. Don't buy this jacket. Buy less, demand more. Made for all it makes you. We're in the business of the planet. Go all the way. Nature is our business. Some of these make sense as far as sustainability, but some of them are unassuming. Don't buy this jacket, for instance. This was a Black Friday push that they had, that they said, don't buy this. And it was really trying to bring awareness to overconsumption and how really we buy things just frivolously. Of course, this jacket sold out that they had this tagline on. And so really it's kind of a counterintuitive thing. Worn wear, they actually have a trade-in and a repair program. If you can wear Patagonia for a long time, send it back to them, they'll fix it, send it back to you one more time. So really backing up who they are as an organization. And then nature is our business. We'll elaborate a little bit more on that as we go. Now, we talked about gathering around fire, but there's one other thing that everyone gathers around in America around this time of the year. You know where I'm going. It's the pumpkin spice latte. I couldn't help it. Had to drop one in here. Starbucks is an interesting brand and one all their own. They have some of the most expensive coffee in the world, and man, I will go get it because it tastes good and they feel good. They make you feel loved. Every time you go through the drive-through or walk in, they're going to read your name out to you, and they smile at you. There is an interesting culture there. The mission statement of Starbucks is to be the premier purveyor of the finest coffee in the world, inspiring and nurturing the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Really unique brand that if you've been, and I'm sure most of you have seen a Starbucks, they seem to be on every corner. They have unique coffees, but they also try to lean towards the sustainable side, just like the Patagonias that we looked at. I'm going to skip past their taglines real quick, and we're just going to go straight to a reflection. So, organizational messaging. Do your team members, do the people within your organization understand the motivation behind your messaging? Does your messaging reinforce the actual experience? And I'll give us just a few minutes to ponder there as well. Say a few minutes. I'm running a little long for my first part, so we'll skip ahead here in just a second. And feel free, like before, to drop something in the chat as well. It's a great question, Dr. April. And I would say, I want you to think in terms of the largest unit that you are. And does your smaller unit understand the motivation of what the largest unit is saying? Is there a connection there? And does that largest unit of messaging connect to the smallest actual experience within your organization? And so what I would say here is just from someone that does help craft a larger organization message, our goal really is and should be to have it be applicable to all levels of the organization. If we can go broad enough within our communication, expect more. If we can go broad enough within our communication, then it should be at least somewhat dual messaging for what we're trying to create internally and externally. Let's go ahead and move on to our next, and that's integrating organizational ethics into brand identity. And again, lending back to our fire as a framework, our values and our ethics are that fire. So I'm going to skip right into the Carti example. We at Carti are an independent organization, and so we have a unique approach to decision making, and that's that really there's a very low power distance, and we are able to make quick decisions without a lot of red tape. Everything is still headquartered out of Little Rock, even though we have regional operations. It is a little bit different, and in every way, we really try to prioritize the patient. Is this good for our patient? We come back to that central question. Is this good for our patients? Is this good for our patients? About a year ago, we said, actually, it's a little bit more than a year ago now. We said, what if we created a podcast? People said, why would you do a podcast? Well, we're not going to do it unless it makes sense. And a lot of people said, well, let's do it. And let's put our doctors on there and they'll talk about healthcare. And I thought that is what everyone else does. That does not make sense for our patients. But what could we talk about? We wrestled with it. And our CARTI values, if you're reading them here, really are an acronym for CARTI. At one point, we were Central Arkansas Radiation Therapy Institute. And we repurposed those values when the building opened in 2015 to mean compassionate care, absolute ownership, resolute teamwork, transcendent purpose, and innovative approach. And what we leaned into with the podcast ultimately was transcendent purpose and innovative approach. It was an innovative way to inspire hope within our patients, within their families. And if we could tell authentic stories, then it would build trust within the organization. It would help people be more compliant in their care. And that would be part of that transcendent purpose, that we could actually help more people. But let's think even bigger. What if that transcendent purpose to help people be compliant and help them have hope doesn't just need to happen in a cancer care organization? Well, let's create something that speaks even larger and goes outside of those bounds. Let's talk about stories of people who have had an amputation, stories of people who have had spousal loss, stories of people of all types that have gone through really, really hard storms, and they've walked out of the other side, maybe not better, but changed. And in some ways, they see the silver lining in the storm cloud. They see something that happened in that storm that shifted them to a different mindset that they could have never gotten to before. And would they choose it again? Probably not. But it's something that impacted them, and that through telling their story, they can help others. So I'm going to give you just a quick clip of the CARTI Hopecast. And I'm actually going to skip through it just so we get a little portion here. So we'll be okay on time.
I fought vulnerability with Janine's diagnosis and her initial decline for at least a year and a half or two, because it was impossible for me to believe that a person who had taken as good a care of herself, as we might say, as she had for 30 years, would actually be, in common parlance, losing her mind. And so what's behind the resistance to accept a chronic disease like cancer that you're working with, or with dementia, is how vulnerable we actually are.
I started out very, very privately, but I got to a point where I felt like there was some ownership that I had at a point where I was going to use my experience to say, okay, I have this and I'm going through this. And if I can encourage you by letting you know that I'm going through that same experience, then great, we're in this together, you know? And if I can come out on the other side and get to a point where I can kind of loosely call myself a survivor, even, you know, which I still kind of, for sure, am reluctant to use the term, because I don't know that I was ever in real mortal danger like a lot of people face. But there's a kinship there. There's a friendship that I have with other people who are going through that. And by all means, let's fight together and encourage each other.
I had 54 days and 13 hours between the time I heard the words, "I'm sorry, it's cancer," to doing the first actionable step, was being admitted in the hospital for my mastectomy. And that was 78,540 minutes of pure torture. And I didn't want anyone else to go through that.
And I'm not talking about a broken image that stays broken. I'm talking about a broken image that gets to be rebuilt, and then someone else gets to come back and grab your story and say, oh, me too, right? Like, okay, if she's a single mom that can start her own business, that lost her husband, that had 5 sons, that is still dealing with adversity and conflict, and still in this fight and still making it and still trying it, if your hope can be restored through my story, and it gives you a glimpse of to fight, because I think part of our making it or pushing forward is something inside of us tells us or gives us strength to fight. And my story gives you a fight, then I'd rather give you my story so that you can fight.
If you haven't listened to any of the Hopecast episodes, I would encourage you to do so. If that doesn't tease you a little bit, they're really powerful stories. People, what I have learned, especially through this, is that everyone has a story. And so it is an honor and a privilege to be able to share those. And it is something that it's not metrics based, and I appreciate that our leadership understands that. It is truly a values based decision, because again, it's not we do have car type, you see it up there, little bitty on the top, but it's the Hopecast. We actually will cut references of Carti if needed, if it seems like it's too marketing pushed, it's too branded. We don't talk about our services. We don't talk about our foundation. This is in no way supposed to lead back to, well, I think I might choose Carti for our care. I want this to build trust and authenticity as an organization. But I'll tell you some of the hardest things, and this one I actually wrestled with sharing it, but I think it's one of the most important. And so within our ethics and values, it's not when you get the things, when everything's going right, it's really easy, right? Just to be an ethical organization. I think organizational culture in action, Dr. Driscoll would tell us it's when we're tested that we really find out if we're an ethical organization or not. We had a tough situation about a month ago. Our foundation does direct mail appeals to households, and a message was missed. I won't lay blame on any specific place, but I'll tell you that there were processes that broke down, and I started receiving messages like the one on the left. Because our direct mail appeal, on the back of the envelope, the vendor decided to put, "Happy birthday, you have cancer." And many of our donors, many of the people that support our organization have had cancer in the past. And so you can imagine if you check the mail one day and you have this past trauma of being a cancer patient, how that would impact you and what you would think. Well, the action was swift. Organizationally, again, we make decisions quickly. We gathered, we figured out a direction, and we said, we're going to pursue this. First is notifying our leadership teams, in a concentric circle out, notifying our team, and then from our CEO, actually notifying the team itself and saying, hey, we messed up. This is not who we are as an organization, and it was made in error. It was supposed to be. There is actually a story of a person that received their cancer diagnosis on their birthday. That's what the fundraising appeal was, but the way that it was put forth was terrible, and it hurt people. And we had a lot of frustrated patients, a lot of frustrated donors. And we still, it's uncomfortable for me to talk about, to be honest, but it's something that is true. And if we can't own these situations, then we can't own anything as an organization in terms of our ethics and our values. So going back to the absolute ownership, the A in Carti, this is what this is. And so we had to own it. We started making individualized phone calls to each person that received this. We sent them another letter apologizing for it, saying, hey, we are so sorry. We should not have sent that. And we continue to try to communicate out that this is not who we are, and that is not how we should have approached our patients or our donors. We're going to go ahead and transition real quick to Patagonia. I'm going to move through these a little quickly, but to reinforce the values of, hey, we're about the earth. We want to be a sustainable company. You want to talk about enacting your values. This is some of their stated values on their website. The owner of Patagonia, actually, who is the sole and primary stakeholder of Patagonia in 2022, said, you know what, let's follow through on who we are to be a sustainable company. I'm just going to make Planet Earth the only stakeholder. So he transferred complete ownership of Patagonia into a trust that will solely benefit ethical, sustainable, values-based, earth-driven, green organizations. And he gave it away in 2022. And really, a lot of people were like, you are crazy. But when interviewed about this, he said, I never wanted to be a shareholder. I never asked to be a millionaire. I just said, I want to do something that helps planet Earth, and I want to be able to give back. He was a climber, as you can see. I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Von Chunard. And even today, he still has a passion for it. And so this is him saying, we can say we're sustainable, but let's be sustainable. Let's do something different. Moving to Starbucks, this is the stated values on the Starbucks website. And if you've heard of Howard Schultz, I think, as we talked about the when it goes wrong, when you're tested, I think Howard Schultz actually can wrap that up even tighter than I can. And so as you move through hard times as an organization, I've got a quick clip of him explaining what it means to be able to learn about your culture during hard times.
Going back to making people proud, what I'm really talking about is the fact that the foundational structure of any organization that is going to build something that is going to endure is culture, values, and guiding principles. And it's very easy to embrace the culture and values and guiding principles of a company when you have the wind at your back, because it's very convenient. When things are going well. When things are going well. And the hardest thing for all of us to do is to really stand up for what you truly believe in when you have the wind at your wind.
Skip forward a little bit there.
Wind in your face, and you're facing significant challenges and people who are skeptical and cynical about what you're trying to do. So the first thing I'd say is that I think you have to ask yourself and kind of write it down. What is your core purpose and reason for being? And I think that has to be like cemented into the company's culture. So everyone in the organization has a individual and a collective understanding that this is our core purpose and this is our reason for being, regardless of what happens.
And if you heard him talk about your core purpose, one of Starbucks' core purpose was belonging, right? They wanted to be able to make not only their team members, but they wanted everyone walking into Starbucks to feel belonging. Well, those values and their actions collided, as they sometimes do. In 2018, and you may have seen this on the news at the time, they actually had a couple of different situations happen where Black men in Philadelphia were arrested just for being in Starbucks. They were there to get coffee and they were arrested. What did Starbucks do? They closed every store and they said, we're going to take an entire day and learn about racial bias, because obviously we've missed something along the way. It happened actually again a couple years later, not the arrest, but in terms of the belonging value, they had team members that wanted to wear Black Lives Matters shirts, and they said, no, you can't wear that apparel. And their team members said, well, you're talking about belonging, right? This is who I belong to. And so they had to meet again, and Schultz talks about it, and he said, you know what, I'm wrong. We need to move past that. So take a few seconds here. Think about a time that your organization had to make a hard decision. We all go through them. What did that communication reflect? And did the stated values of the organization inform it? Or was there a gap between what you say your values are and what was actually happening? And again, as Howard Schultz said, it's easy when the wind's at your back. But when things are going against you, can you live out who you say you are? And do you have a core guiding principle? All right, into our last piece here. We're still on our fire metaphor. We're talking about the warmth, the glow of the organization at this point. And culture is one of my favorite things about an organization, because it can vary so much, and you can learn so much just to be immersed within a group of people that are, living the same thing every day. So I do want to touch on the values just a little bit here for Carti as we move into it. You've seen hopefully a few different ways. Let me actually move back to that. You've seen the absolute ownership that we've kind of had to work through. Obviously, compassionate care. If you're an oncology nurse, transcendent purpose with innovative approach. But I think this is a really important way that our leader, Adam, and he actually is our podcast host. He's uniquely equipped to be able to do that as well. He gave us a nod. I actually work with a lot of his communication. This is not one that I touched. This is completely from the desk of Adam Head. And I'm going to zoom this up a little bit just so you can see this. There's a couple of important lines here. He sent this. I had no intention of putting this in there. Added this just today because he sent it yesterday. We're approaching the 10-year anniversary of the Cancer Center here. And really, he sent this to the whole team. The whole reason is just to be able to say, we're living our mission. I think several of you are probably reading, so I'm trying to give you a little space. But there's a couple of lines here. In that first paragraph, the trust you've earned is the foundation of who we are. Again, telling the team, you're doing it every day. We can say who we are all the time, but the trust you've earned is who Carti is. And I want to remind us that the way we live out our Carti values with one another is felt far beyond our walls. Again, that internal culture is the most important. And the paragraph before, it's guided by what we call our transcendent purpose, being specific. And he's keying in to say, hey, we have a recognition of what we have, and what we have is really a gift. So again, that internal culture building, and how do we reinforce it? Language is one way that we can do that. So that's what Adam's doing here. We also have an internal recognition program for people that embody values. Monetary reward systems don't always work, but we've actually had pretty strong success with it. And just to give you some insight into a few of those, here are 3 different winners. I'm going to read you just a couple of them. Top left here, in Stuttgart, we have several patients who are illiterate, and one was blind. They're unable to complete their paperwork. Yesterday, we had multiple patients come in for this, and Stephanie immediately offered to help and complete the paperwork so we could get them into their appointments and checked in completely. And then top left, this is Willie works, close to our team on the 3rd floor here, and Willie demonstrated, this is someone else nominated him from a clinical area. Willie demonstrated resolute teamwork to the highest degree today when he helped our patient and nurse clean up a patient, change his clothes, and then clean the entire exam room. The patient was incontinent and had an accident, and Willie did this voluntarily without being asked, and he went above and beyond without any complaint and a smile on his face, all the while being so kind and compassionate to the patient. Examples like that are why we all show up to work, to be able to have those meaningful interactions. And so this was one of those tangible ways we could reinforce to these team members and in front of their teams often that being able to embody those values was important. and then our Patagonia reference. So again, build the best product, a reminder of the values, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature. We're not bound by convention. Well, how do they do that? Well, they give their team members some really interesting benefits. Flexibility of time. At Patagonia, you can work, if you saw that picture, and you can go surf whenever you want. Hey, you're cool enough to do it. You can come back and do your work later. They're family friendly. They have a daycare on site, flexible scheduling. If you need to be, with family, they're just very open. But I think one of the coolest things that they do is paid activism and volunteering. They back up saying that if we're supposed to be about the bigger picture, then we're going to let our team members be able to be part of that bigger picture, and we'll actually pay them to do it. Starbucks, kind of the same. Craft courage, just reminder of those values. I'm going to skip past the Starbucks. You've all been in a Starbucks. It's them talking about how much they love talking to their people. And how do they embody it? They have inclusion and diversity. They have openness in their communication with leadership, collaboration, servant leadership, and that relationship-driven approach. So if we're thinking about your organization, again, just quick reflection, how consistently are people being recognized for the work that they're doing? I think recognition systems is one of the hardest parts of culture to do right, because it can be so flawed and it can feel so incentivized in some ways that you're only doing this because. So maybe a follow-on to that is it working? Is your recognition system working? And the third would be, do the everyday interactions between teammates reflect the same values? If you work in an area with someone and you have to communicate with them every day, does that communication or the people that I think most organizations have that other team. If the other team would just do this, right? The scapegoat team, if they would just do this, then we'd all be fine. Do you have the respect? Are you living out your values in that communication, in that interaction with that other team? I'm going to go ahead and move to a close here just because I know we are getting tight on time. But we're going to go back to the metaphor for just a second. We're going to talk about protecting the fire, tending the fire, if you will. Right? A lot of people for a long time have tried to make a mark on the world. They've tried to make their own handprint. We all do in our organizations. We're hoping, if you're part of an organization, I'm sure you hope in large part that organization is making a mark on the world, and together we're doing something larger. And the cultures back then and the cultures today are very different, but strong cultures often share many of the same things. It often can be looked back even to those cave days, maybe a little bit later. But we had recognition systems in place. We had responsibility in place. These were expectations, and we had relationship. And so tonight we've looked at a few different things, and hopefully you've been able to see, through the recognition of the cheers and the language of compassion, we can build a strong culture here at Carti. Through Patagonia, with flexible schedules, paid activism, and Starbucks, they have the servant leadership, they have an inclusion, and they have a sense of belonging in who they are. But again, aligning all three, difficult, but it does help build an ethical culture when you have your values, your communication, what we're saying, and our actions all in line. I told you I was going to try to extend it just a little bit. So extending the metaphor, these are just because. Who's tending the fire? right? Who's keeping watch? Who's making sure that it doesn't get out of control? Who's making sure that it's fed? If you've ever had a campfire and someone says, "Hey, throw another log on the fire," it's what we're talking about here. And what kind of wood are we using? Are we throwing on big logs that are sustainable? Are we just kind of we're just keeping it going? But if we don't look at it for a little bit, it's going to burn out. And if that flame does go down, who is actually holding the flame? Who's got the aiming flame so that we can get the flame going again? Who is that champion of your value system that really embodies it the most? So again, we just looked at how are we co-creating tonight? And again, if we're going to say this another way, we're going to say, what handprints are you leaving? Thank you all for your time tonight. Thank you for sticking with me. I know we've gone a little bit long on time, but I will stick around. If anyone has any questions, would love to discuss it further.
Nathan, thank you so much. And if you'll quit sharing your screen, and we'll have everybody's picture up here. That way we'll be able to see if there's questions. I would love for us to have some time for questions and answers. And so if you would, if you have time, just put a question in the chat, or to raise your virtual hand or your actual hand. We'll be looking for those. This has really made me think about my own institution, UA Little Rock, in terms of, in fact, I was just looking, I'm like, what are our values? I mean, and do I even know what they are? And so interesting, the questions that you're asking, and so for us to be thinking about. So questions from the gallery here, the people that are here, things that this made you think about. It doesn't have to be questions, it could be a comment as well. Looking for hands or things in the chat. Stephanie.
Hey, I just want to say you did a great job. I listened to your questions along the way and was answering them to myself. I guess the question I would have, I know that there are some people in the audience who will soon be receiving communications, since most of us are studying applied communications. Do you anticipate growth in that area for Cartel and where close to jobs?
Stephanie, it's really hard to hear you. And so I'm not sure I quite got your question. I don't know if Nathan heard you better than I did. So I'm not sure if there's a mic issue or. And Nathan, did you catch your question?
I got a little bit of it. I caught the last portion.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit louder. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm sorry I don't have my earbuds in, which is the problem. I have a really bad headache. So I said, great job. I loved listening to your questions and kind of answering internally as to my current role, and they weren't things to share out loud. So I did not. However, I know that there are people here on this call who are going to be graduating soon with either an undergraduate degree or graduate degree that are interested in working in a place that values communication and making sure that our messages are brought back to our vision and values. So do you anticipate having openings in the future? And so where do you advertise your job postings?
Yes, great question. Sorry I couldn't hear you the first time. Yes, we do actually have job listings. We are working with one of a fellow alumni right now, Derek Newby, is actually our talent acquisition specialist for Carti. He is fantastic, and he leads that department. If you have any questions, he could probably answer them, but they are at carti.com/careers. And we do have locations, 18 locations in 16 communities across the state. And so there are a lot of openings, really diverse array, a lot of clinical roles. But I will say one of the struggles I had over time, I've worked in a lot of different roles before I ended up here, is trying to find a place that really lived out their values. It's hard. It's hard to find strong leadership, hard to find teams that are bought in. So we do have a special thing at Carti. There are other great organizations, but I think you'll find something on there.
Other questions or comments? Marisha has a question in the chat. How do you make sure values are reflected in a company or organization? And do you think that having a founding story is really important to an organization?
Thank you for your question, Marisha. I appreciate it. So how do we make sure they're reflected in the organization? I think it is the large scale communication of our leadership to the finite actions of our individual team members with our patients and with each other. And to make sure that it's reflected, I really think being able to bring it up in conversation and have it reinforced in that communication. It's one thing, again, to put it on the wall or put it on the about page, but we have to talk about it. We have to talk about why we're doing this and how we're doing this and try to bring it up in conversation. Just to give you an example, in our day one orientation for any new team member at Carti, our CEO, Adam, actually is the very first voice that any person hears. Katie, who's actually an alum, is in there, and she leads the orientation. But Adam's the very first voice, and he talks about the values of Carti, why we do what we do, and how everything within our team goes back to that absolute ownership and resolute teamwork and compassionate care for our patients. And so it's really trying to make it a norm, and it's tough to do that. As far as founding story, I think it's important to have stories because that's sense making for our organizations. We had a really hard time before Adam got here as an organization, pretty dark time, financially challenging, and people talk about that a lot. And so there's a before and an after. And what helped that? Well, part of that was that values transformation. Hope that answers. Oh, see one more. How do you balance being results driven while still leading with empathy? That's a great question. It is, they are not mutually exclusive. And so you can be value driven and you can also have, or the results driven, and you can also have empathy. And in some ways they challenge one another. You'll have, results do, if you have enough patients, we'll just use a patient perspective. If we have so many patients that it challenges our ability to provide that compassionate care, then that's a situation we have to talk about. And so it kind of informs our issues if we have those outstanding results. But it's framing everything within the values at the end of the day. Yes, thank you, Courtney. So our question is how to use your applied communication degree to get a job, and can I tell you briefly how it benefits? Absolutely. Well, in just a worldview relational standpoint, I would say I had a total shift as a person between walking into the doors, and if Dr. Maribel's still here, he kind of kept me in his office long enough to make me be an applied communications major in my undergrad, reluctantly, but it's the best decision I've ever made, in all honesty. And that's because when I am communicating with people, first is just the active listening element and being able to really hear the message. But there are so many in practice techniques that I learned from all of the different people, even on this call, Dr. Driscoll to Dr. April, Dr. McIntyre. If you notice a little macro structure in what I put together for you tonight, I mean, there's really ways that in all of my communication, especially in my writing, I've had to refine what I'm doing. I know that AI is kind of the thing right now. And I think we're all wrestling with what does it mean for our communication? It's really easy to say, hey, write me this or do this. but there's a muscle that you learn through physical writing, maybe not with pen and paper, but through actually being able to form those sentences and being able to make those sentences impactful, that AI is not working. And so whether you use it for let me get through this thing, most of the organizational communication comes through my office, and being able to pour over it and say, what are we saying here? And then trying to focus that message even tighter. That is a direct result of the training, of the refining, of the revision process. And it may seem tough at the time. When we went through Bird by Bird in the MA program, Dr. April, I know I was wrestling with, can I not just put this off till the last minute and write it all at once? Do I really have to? And so being able to systematically go through something and revise it is a skill that I took from this program. Long-winded answer, but I could go on all day about that.
All right, time for one more. Gerald?
I was just doing a thumbs up. Good
Oh,
stuff.
thumbs up.
A
Okay.
lot of notes. We're going to start bringing logs into the office and see if we can get by with indoor fires as well. See.
Be
I
awesome.
wondered if we could go to a s'mores metaphor at the end of it, but I didn't get there.
Oh, that'd be good with chocolate and the logs. Well, we really appreciate, Nathan, you taking the time. And I will tell you, my husband has a personal experience with CAR-T. Nobody wants to have an experience with CAR-T in terms of cancer, right? But both my husband and my sister have had experiences with CAR-T, and I will just tell you that the values are real. And so I appreciate what you all do to live those out, and your role in the process, and even the vulnerability and honesty that you shared about the situation that happened even recently, with what you had to go back and kind of retract, and those lived experiences are things that we all can learn from. And so thank you so much. That's what these leadership lectures are about. In the spring, we have another one that's coming up, Robert Mock, who, by the way, just found out tonight. Gerald talked to him last Friday night. He just got hired as the new president of Peru State College in Nebraska. I didn't even know there was a college named that. Kristen, you might know where that is. It's actually was the first college in Nebraska. You should look it up, but he is starting that job in January. And so his leadership lecture was supposed to be in person for us next February, but I'm going to have to confirm now, since he's starting that job, it may be also over Zoom for us. But stay tuned for more information about that. But I was excited to hear that he got that job. Anyway, he's another one of our alums that's making a difference. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all for coming. I know those of you who are in my class, we will be 5-minute break, and then we will start class, so that you will have a potty break if you need to, or get something to eat break. And other than that, I think we're done for the evening. So thank you all for coming. And Nathan, thank you again. Really appreciate hearing from you and your expertise tonight.
It's good stuff. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.